Okay. I'm not sure how to fix that. We tried before. How about Luann, you just take it from here. I will try not to speak.
Okay. All righty. Well, hopefully I'm coming through okay. There's no echo. Yep, I'm seeing no echo. Debbie, if you can watch the chat as far as we're going along. And so I know that there are a few people that are new from that were not on the first webinar. That night, I had hardly any voice at all. By the end of the night, I had no voice. And a couple days later, I went to the doctor and found out I had pneumonia. So I am feeling much better. I think my voice is much better. And we're going to go ahead. We've got a ton of information that we're going to go ahead and go through with you. So let's go ahead and get going here. And you know, this is, I wasn't expecting to be able for you guys to see me, so I just put my picture up there. But my background, if you don't know, in financial services, I just decided that as I saw how much debt parents and students were taking on, that I wanted to, my practice is primarily dealing with college and retirement planning. So everybody, you know, you're here because we want to find out about, you know, the FAFSA. So keep calm, and we're going to go about the FAFSA tonight. And what I'm going to do is I've filed several FAFSAs this week for clients, and I've got screenshots. So this is where you start off. Now, for those of you with brand new students, this is your very first time. You're going to start over here on the left, start a new FAFSA. And of course, for those of you that, what I call the walking wounded, you already have somebody in college, you'll go ahead and log in as a returning user. Now, you'll see this login screen, and the FSA ID, login and password is the student's. It is not the parent's FSA ID and password. Now, if you don't know what your students, if it comes up and says, oh, misinformation, this doesn't match up, you can go ahead and enter the student's information, their name, their social, date of birth, and such, but you're still going to need the FSA ID and password to sign and submit. So you do want to make sure that you get that squared away. Once you've logged in, you'll see this particular screen, and it says, you know, it's solely, you know, normal legalese disclosure. Just go ahead and accept, and then you're going to come up, year are you applying for financial aid? So and this is where people make so many mistakes not paying attention, because we think, oh, we're in 2017, so we're going to use this. That is for last year's students, or the students that are in college right now. So 2018-19 is the year that we're using right now for the FAFSA for the fall of next year, 2018. Now, when you, excuse me, your next screen is to create a save key. Now, I always just use the student's first name. I think the only time I ran into an issue where I had to put, you know, a few more letters was for somebody who only had 2 initials in their name. I think you have to have at least 3. And the reason for this is, say you get into the FAFSA and you don't have all of your information, it's going to time you out anyways. So as long as you have this save key, you can always log back in. It's going to ask you for the save name or whatever you put in there, and you'll be able to get back in, and it will have kept your information. Oops, hit the wrong next. Now, if we went back a couple of slides, you see down in the left-hand corner, there's always a little help box. And so if you click on that, it's going to come up with a bunch of, you know, how to do the FSAID, how to go to FAFSA.ed to find out different questions. When will the FAFSA be available, and my student have my FAFSA form? What should I do? So there is help. Take advantage of it and click on those before you call the FAFSA hotline, which, depending on who you get, you may or may not get a correct answer. So then the next page is, here we go again. You can click on any of these hyperlinks, and can I save my FAFSA if I can't finish it? Documents needed to complete the FAFSA. There's all that information there that most people just don't even pay attention to. So the very first page, as far as, and so I'll just give a little disclaimer. You can't get into the FAFSA unless once you have input a FSA ID or the student's information. So then it's going to pre-populate into pages like this. And of course, I'm not going to show that information. So the very top of the first page, the student demographic, that's where you're going to make sure that their name is spelled correctly, the social, date of birth. You are going to have to put their middle initial, and it's asking for parents' information, as well as right at the bottom it asks for the student's driver's license number. Do you want to to include that? If you haven't written down your kid's driver's license number, it doesn't have to go in there. So don't fret about that. Then you're looking at student eligibility. Yes, I am a citizen or not. There's drop downs here. And over here on the right, these help and hints. Every single time that you've clicked on a box, there's going to be helpful hints for that particular question. Now, let's see, when you begin college in 2018-19, what year? Once you're going to have your high school diploma, but the next question, never attended college, first year. Some of you, your kids have been taking AP classes, IB classes, they've got college credits, and you think that, wow, they've got enough credits for their first year. Unless they've got their associate's degree, they're just still attending college for the first year, never attended college. First bachelor's degree. Down here is where it's important too, where it asks highest school completed by parent 1 and parent 2. If you have not, you've just taken some college classes, you didn't finish, you didn't get an associate's and you didn't get a bachelor's, then you just put high school. It's not going to, I had a parent one time said, well, I would think it would look better that they came from a family where the parents had gone, to college. But the thing is, you could be missing out on grants or certain types of selectivity at some schools because they want first generation students, and so it just be honest. If you didn't finish college, just put high school. If you went on and got your PhD, it's college and beyond. We all know the names of our high schools by, nicknames or abbreviations. You want to make sure that you've got the correct spelling, the town that they're in, and you want to hit this confirm button, and it will bring up to make sure you're confirming the actual or high school that they've attended. I don't know about you, but in our area, all these little towns that are part of the county, sometimes the parents are really surprised to find out that it's in one name of town instead of what they've thought all along. So once that's gone, you're going to go now into the school selection. And you'll see that it's talking about application was successfully saved. As long as you are, and I'm sorry that I should have said this beforehand, as you're going through the FAFSA, you want to hit next and or previous if you have to go back to a previous page. If you hit your browser, to go back, you're going to lose your information. And it's going to bump you out, and you're going to have to log back in and redo everything. So get into the habit of, clicking on next to go forward or previous to go back. And that does save the information that you had just input. Now here, you can add up to 10 colleges to your FAFSA. And that was a question that's been asked a few times. What if I have to add more schools? So you're going to go ahead and select, the state that the school is in, and you can go ahead and type in the name of the school. And once again, not abbreviations, but the full name of the school. When you hit search, it should bring up the school that you're looking at, or it might bring up several, and maybe they're in different cities because they've got more than one campus. So you want to make sure that you're indicating the right school. And it will show, every school has a federal school code, and it will bring up that school code. For those of you that are doing the CSS profile, you want to go ahead and write that code number down, because you're going to have to put that into the CSS profile. Now, before we talk about other more than 10, some of you are wondering, do I have to put schools in certain order or such? So some states, for your in-state school, your resident state school, some states require you to put their state universities at the first and second selection in order for you to receive a state grant. So you want to know that ahead of time to make sure that you're putting this in correctly. It used to be that the schools could see, all of the schools on there, and a few years ago they stopped doing that. What I used to do is just put everything in alphabetical order, and that way they couldn't, hold it against you in any way. So when you get to the point where you say you have more than 10 schools, say you've got 15 schools that your son or daughter are applying to, you put in the first 10 schools, and then you finish, your FAFSA and submit. It's going to take about 3 days for that to process. You want to make sure that the schools, that your first 10 schools have received that information, and then you can go back in and delete 5 of those schools and put in the next 5 schools. You can also call the college and ask them to input it, or you could call FAFSA. But they will also still need to delete some schools off of the list. So you want to keep track of that as your acceptances and non-acceptances are coming in, and those that you don't get accepted, just remove them from the FAFSA and try to keep the ones that you have that that are still on your list. Excuse me. So you'll come up with the school selection summary now, and so no matter if you just put a couple of schools or 10, all that information is going to be here, and you're going to indicate what the housing arrangements are going to be, whether they're going to live with the parent, live off campus, or live in the dorm. Now, for this particular one, showing you that for those of you that are applying to community colleges, they're also in the FAFSA. They also have their federal school code. Now, and then here's another one, and I know that it's small. I'm on a small screen right now, but when the recording comes through, you'll probably be able to see this a bit better. So in this situation, this particular student, she's in Virginia, so I listed the 2 Virginia schools first. Well, actually, there's 3. I put them in alphabetical order, and then the out-of-state schools. Now, over here on the right, if you can see first, up, down, and last, this is where you can move schools. Say if you want to add a school afterwards, you can, and you need to move it up because it's your state school and your state gives grants. You just use these little keys over here and you can move schools up and down as needed. And then, excuse me, let me go back to the previous screen. I'm not on, oh, here we are, sorry. So see right here where it says view selected school information. If you click on that, then it will bring up this compare school information. And you know, whether you've got 2 schools or 10 schools, you'll have all of the information as far as their federal code, their websites that you can hyperlink over to, their in-state, out-of-state tuition and fees, the net price, graduation rate. Those graduation rates are in 6 years, not 4, retention rate, and so on. So now your next screen is going to be the dependency determination. And once again, every time you click on a yes or a no, there will be the helpful hints over here. And it's going to go down to probably until are you a veteran of the U.S. Forces? Once you hit yes or no, then these other lines are going to come up one at a time. So in this case, everything is a no, which then means that you must provide parental information, and then you can then select I will or I am unable. It just depends. Hopefully everyone will be able to provide parental information. And if you have not, then it actually ends up opening up another screen and tells you what you need to do at that point. So, application successfully saved. Now we're talking about the parent. As of today, what is the marital status of your parents? The email address, have they lived in the state for, you know, however many years? In Virginia, it's got to be at least 5. And here is where some people have been asking questions as far as, well, household size and, you know, when you've got combined families, and or in one question was someone was living with their boyfriend who has college-age students. Now, if you say you are the mom, and this is your FAFSA, or you're the boyfriend, and you know it's your FAFSA. But if you're not financially supporting the other children of the other person, then you do not count them as college students in your parents' household. If you are financially supporting them somehow, you can include them in the household size, as well as how many are going to be in college at during at the same time as you're filing the FAFSA. You do not include the parents. So if you're the parent and you're in college, you are not adding yourself as a student on your child's FAFSA. Now, on your FAFSA, you can definitely add your students, your children. And of course, once again, as you click on over here, it describes, you know, who is considered a parent. And even if this is talking about grandparents and legal guardians, older brothers or sisters, unless they've adopted the student, they are not considered a parent. One other thing, if you have remarried, then that step parent's information, if yours is the primary household, is going to be included, not the biological dad or mom if they are not if they are not the ones that are going to be filing the FAFSA. So once you've included that, they're saying, okay, you must provide financial information from your parents' tax return. And the drop down over here is, well, what type of return have they filed, will they file, or will they not file? and you know, it's pretty straightforward. So now in this instance, we're showing, okay, they've already completed and they filed filed joint return. And there's a question about Puerto Rico, foreign returns and whatnot. But now this is the page where we get to the dreaded DRT, the data retrieval tool. And this is where there's so much controversy this year. So I will share with you what I am doing and what you can decide what you're going to do. So if you are going to link to the IRS, you click on that little tab and it's going to open up this page, and it's saying, oh, it's going to be so much easier to apply and use the data retrieval tool. And you have a choice. You can link to the IRS or you can hit no thanks. So personally, what I'm doing with my clients, I am first clicking no thanks, and then I am manually inputting their information. If you are going to go straight to the DRT, you just click on link to the IRS. And I'll explain in a little bit why I'm doing that. So in this situation, because this was a client that I've had in the past, I knew exactly what their EFC was going to be, and I got their permission to go ahead and connect to the DRT. So this was my test case. So when you click on yes, send me to the IRS, you get to the irs.gov site, and then there's going to be, prior to getting to this bottom page, you have your name, your social security, you're going to put your date of birth, and you're going to input your address. And this is where a lot of people have major mistakes and major problems. You look at the address that is on your tax return, your federal tax return. If your accountant spelt your name incorrectly, if they spelt your street incorrectly, if they put an abbreviation for street or lane, you put it exactly how it is on your federal tax return, or else it's not going to come up. So then you're going to check this box, transfer my tax information into the FAFSA, and then come over here and click on transfer now. And what's going to happen is it's going to tell you that yes, your information was correct and we've transferred it to your FAFSA, and click and you can go back to the FAFSA. And I couldn't make a screenshot of that because of course it had personal information on there. So now it's showing you have successfully transferred your IRS information, and for every line that the data retrieval tool has transferred information, you're going to see transferred from the IRS. What this did last year and previous years, you were able to see the dollar amount that was transferred. You are not going to see that now. And I just don't like that. So here's more parent financial information, transferred. But now you're going to see I opened up, clicked on American Opportunity. That was already transferred. But down here, if you have paid child support or have any of these other sections, as you click on it, the information will come over here on the right. Now, for those of you that are receiving child support, you want to make sure that you don't click here because this is for child support paid. We just have to pay attention. I actually did that one time and I had to go back in and make a correction because I was trying to multitask and I should have known better. So now that was the DRT. This information I'm sharing with you now is if you're going to, you didn't use the DRT and you're going to do it manually. So it's going to ask what type of return, whether it was a 1040, 1040A, 1040EZ. What was your parents' adjusted gross income? You can, as you click on this, it will tell you the line that you go to, which is line 37. You're going to input individually each parent's W-2 information. You must do this. And what I'm told is that you have to do that even if you chose to do the DRT, which I didn't see that page come up, and I think that that's where people are having an error with their EFCs being too high. But I don't know yet because I haven't actually seen one. You can click on this income estimator and it will bring up a different screen where it's kind of like a worksheet. So it's going to, once again, it's going to tell you each line that you go to on your tax return to input your information. And once again, it's got all the same questions, but you'll notice there's nothing that says, transferred from the DRT. This is the, when you click on the income estimator, you have this little worksheet here that you can input and hit calculate, and it'll take care of that for you. And once again, here's down below where you would put the W-2 information. So there's been so many posts about asset protection allowance, and most of it is incorrect that people have been stating. Somebody states, well, if you have less than 29,100 or 26,000 whatever, and then so a lot of people are thinking that that's the figure. Everyone's asset protection allowance is going to be different. It goes according to your age, and it goes according to either a two-parent household or a one-parent household. So if you got to this page, it will have asked you, do you have any assets above whatever your asset protection allowance was? It could be $9,600 or it could be $36,000. It just depends on how they calculated the age of the oldest parent and what your asset protection allowance is. So if you're above the asset protection allowance, you're going to end putting here yes, and you're going to put cash, savings, and checking accounts. Then the next line is for investments, and then the next line is for current business, investment farm, or such. You do not include the family farm or family business that is less than 100 employees and is 100% family owned. And we'll go into that a little bit more in the questions. I put these helpful hints separately because there's so many questions about what do we put for investments, where do 529 plans go and such. So it is stated right there in the directions of the FAFSA. Just click, when you click on the box, it's going to show you the hints off to the right. Investments include real estate that is not your primary residence, trust funds, UGMA and UTMA accounts that you have as the parent, money market funds, mutual funds, CDs, stocks, and so on. Investments also include, this is where you are going to list your 529 and the Coverdell savings accounts and the refund value of the 529 prepaid tuition plans. you have to get the amount of the refund value of those accounts, and those are going to count as a parent asset. Over here, investments do not include the home in which your parents live, the value of the cash value inside life insurance contracts, the balances of your retirement plans, qualified plans such as 401ks, IRAs, HEAL plans and such, and you do not put cash, savings, and checking accounts because you've already listed that elsewhere. That is not considered an investment. And I just saw a sign. The form Luann is showing asks for mothers. It's because the example that I showed you, it was a mom. So that's why it's asking for the mother's asset. If this example was a husband and wife, it would say parents. So once again, this is an example of various FAFSAs that I have filed. It doesn't, if it asks for the mom, it's because you are filing just as the mom. If it asks for parents, it's asking for both parents. So hopefully that that answered that question, because I know Debbie's trying to answer. So now we're at the student tax information, and there also has been a lot of questions about that. And I'm going to, and this hasn't been addressed at all anywhere. If your student filed a tax return, you will also collect go to the DRT and do the same thing that you did with the parents' tax return. So if they filed a tax return, you are going to go to the DRT for your student, and that information is going to transfer just like it did with the parent. Now, if your child has not filed a tax return and they did earn income, this drop down is going to say will file, haven't filed yet, and won't file. So you do not, you have to hit a certain income, and I've got that in the Q&A. So it's not the end of the world. If they earned some income, say they earned a couple of $1,000s and you didn't file a tax return for them, that's okay. You're just not getting back any of the tax that they may have paid that they were due, but it doesn't automatically assume that now you're going to have to go to the IRS and get a form that says that they didn't file, that they earned. I have never had that happen. Maybe now with this new DRT thing, that might be happening. I don't know, but it's not the end of the world. It's just a matter of going to the IRS and getting that form. And I'll address it too. If you choose not to use the DRT, or maybe you can't use the DRT, if you have had amended your tax return, you cannot use the DRT. So what you should do once you filed your FAFSA is go and request a tax transcript from the IRS. Now, if you had just recently done your amended tax return, it's not going to show up in the tax records for probably 4, 5, 6 weeks. So you have to give it some time. But if you've chosen not to use the DRT because you don't want to have any issues, you don't want to have a bunch of blank information transferring, just go ahead and request a tax transcript. If the school asks you to supply it, you've got it on hand. If they don't ask you to supply it, don't send it to them. Don't send them anything that they haven't asked for, because that just opens up a whole can of worms. So once again, the student financial information, you can see that this is very similar to the parent's financial information. So always pay attention. What is it saying on the left-hand side here? Are we putting in student information or parent information? That's where one of the, another of those big mistakes that people make, because they're just panicking and just take a deep breath and slowly go through it. Now, I check mark down here, money received or paid on your behalf. So this opens up over here the helpful hints, and it explains exactly what you're supposed to include, which is distributions to the student from a 529 plan that is owned by someone other than you or your parents, such as your grandparents, aunts, uncles, and non-custodial parents. So you've got to read it, and if you're getting money on someone else, on behalf of someone else that is not the parent or parents that are filing the FAFSA, you have to disclose that. So if grandma and grandpa are, giving, paying for college and such, and it's not sitting in their savings, the savings account of the student, you've got to disclose these things. It's really important. And we'll discuss in a little bit how you can use that 529 so it's not going to count as income from those third-party sources. So now, once again, student financial information. So there is not an asset protection allowance for the student. I don't care if they have $10 in their checking or savings account, or if they have $10,000. On the day that you file the FAFSA, is whatever is in the account is what you are to disclose. Take a screenshot of your statement so that you've got documentation. The second is investments. Now, in this particular case, this $746 was the value of a couple of stocks that the parents had in the child's name. So if you have stocks, whether it's in Disney or Google or whatever for your child, you've got to get the current value of that and input it as an investment. And this is for the student asset. This is where if you have a UGMA or an UTMA, and it's all listed up here, that your financial advisor or your CPA told you to open up an UGMA or an UTMA so that you could pay kiddie tax instead of your tax. All it's done now is create a unfair assessment on the FAFSA, because that is considered a student asset, and there is no asset protection. And then, of course, if they have a student business, I actually have a sophomore who has started a student business. So we're already starting to make sure that everything is set up so he's not going to be penalized unfairly, as this is the base year for getting all that kind of stuff set up. So we're at the end, the sign and submit page, and we're all still alive. We haven't, I don't know, maybe somebody had to reach for a glass of wine or something, but we survived. So this is where I can't, once again, show, the complete page because of privacy. But if you are having someone completely prepare your FAFSA for you, All you did is you gave them your information. They've input everything, they're filing and whatnot, and then they just send you the information. And you're paying them to do that. Then they are a preparer, and they would click yes and provide their name or their business name and their tax ID. If you've got somebody who's just helping you, or, like for me, part of my service, I don't charge for filing a FAFSA, but I help the family make sure that all of the information is input in there, and then we go through all of this together. So they're submitting. I'm not the preparer in this instance, but some companies, they would be. So the student, you're going to come up here and it's going to say down here, it defaults to disagree. So you need to go ahead and click agree. You're going to read the disclosure that, okay, I'm going to pay back my loans, and I understand that this is, for attending higher education and whatnot. Because you had to insert the FSA ID and password for the student to sign into their FAFSA, as soon as you click on agree here and then hit submit, you don't have to input their FSA ID again. It's already been input. Now, for the parent, that's different. Once again, it defaults to disagree. You click on agree. You're going to have to put your FSA login and password, and then you hit submit. Excuse me. You hit submit, not submit my FAFSA now, but the submit for signing. And as long as you've input the correct information, then it's going to come up application signed by parent. If you get an error that says, the information is not, either the email or the password are incorrect, and this is your second year filing, it just means that you're going to have to go in and create a new password. They're supposed to be good for 18 months, but I've been noticing that it doesn't last as long. And that's going to be for the student as well as for the parent as well. So once you've done this, before you hit submit my FAFSA now, what I do is I click on view FAFSA summary, and it brings up the summary of the FAFSA, and I print it off and I go through it and the parents go through it, and we make sure that everything is correct. Your eyes play tricks on you sometimes if you've just continued to keep looking at the same information. So it's always good to have a couple of different sets of eyes looking over that. And I print that out and then come back to this page and then go ahead. When we're ready, we submit the FAFSA. So what happens is then it comes up, and up at the top it says congratulations with the name of the student. You have completed your FAFSA, and then you will receive an email version of this page, and it's going to list all of the schools that you had included on the FAFSA, the graduation retention rate and transfer rate. So down mid-page, you're going to see, and a lot of parents miss this. Now, in this particular instance, this is supposed to be all zeros. This particular student does have a 0 EFC. Her mom's income is only Social Security disability. She doesn't file a tax return, and it's just the student's income. And in this case, she earned $10,000 in income in 2016. So she's above the, the student's income protection allowance of $62.40 or something like that. And she had like $300 in her savings account. So she qualified for a 0 EFC, and over on the right, it's going to tell that she is eligible to receive the Pell Grant, and eligible to receive the Stafford loans. But we still have to make sure that everything goes along as it should be, and to make sure that she's going to receive everything that she needs to receive. So if you had closed, you got to a point where you had to exit out of the FAFSA without submitting, you always make sure that you hit save, because you don't want to go in and have to input all of that all over again. And what's going to happen, this page is going to come up. You started in 2018-19, have not submitted. Would you like to continue where you left off? So when you go to log back into the FAFSA account, this is what you're going to see, and you would just hit continue. You certainly don't want to hit start over, but that option is there in case you lost everything. Now, if you had submitted your FAFSA, everything went through, and you go back in and log in, you're going to see about 3 days later that your current application status, it processed successfully. It was sent to the schools, and everything is just wonderful. Now, you can see here, you can also view or print your student aid report, the SAR, or you can go in and you might need to make some FAFSA corrections as far as to add a school, transfer the IRS data, which is what I will be doing with all of my clients. After we've seen that it initially processed, I'm going to go in to make a correction and use the IRS data retrieval tool. If you do not have to go in and make a correction, you do want to go ahead and get a copy of the student aid report and make sure that everything is correct on it. Now, your student is going to get this letter in their email. It doesn't come to you as the parent, it comes to your student. Congratulations, your FAFSA was processed. You can click on this hyperlink, which will then take you over to the FAFSA, put in the student aid, the FSA ID information, and go and you can find your student aid report and get that copy. I'm a paper person. I like copies and to have in a file folder so that if I do have to call, I'm not trying to look at a screen going back and forth and such. So when you go back into the FAFSA, it opens up with the processed information, view student aid report, and you can click on that and get the PDF. It's going to also, the student aid report is about 5 pages long. So, and just so that there's no misunderstanding, this is a different EFC for someone. So you see the 2 zeros in front of the 8587. Everybody gets so confused over this, and they don't think that this is their EFC because it starts with zeros. So for this particular EFC, it's $8,587. I think they deliberately do this to mislead and confuse people, but hey, I can't prove it. So it tells you if you need to make corrections, go to the FAFSA page, hit corrections. Now, I will tell you that if you end up going in to make a correction, you must follow through. You can't just stop it and say, oh, I've got to go find some other information, because now what it's going to show is that your FAFSA now is back in a pending status where it hasn't been submitted. So you've got to make sure that if you do go in to make a correction to add a school or such, that you follow through with that process. Now, this is the page on the student aid report that lists all of the information. And so this was done with the family that I used the DRT. And you can see transferred from the IRS, transferred from the IRS. There is no figures that have been transferred from the IRS. These other figures that are here are the ones that you have to input yourself, your checking and savings, net worth of investments, child support received. And yes, I know it doesn't show up on the tax return. It doesn't matter. If you received child support and or paid child support, that needs to be, you have to input that information onto the FAFSA. And this is just, once again, a little bit of a larger screen that I was able to copy. So we're going to get now, that's the FAFSA, that's done. And now we're going to get into the questions and answers, of the a lot of questions that were emailed in that we're going to address. And I haven't been looking at over to the side, Debbie, I haven't been following because it just gets, I don't multitask well. Maybe what I'll do is go through the questions that we have, and then I'll go through that and see if there are any others that hadn't been answered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, Luann. Sorry about the echo. I've been trying to answer as many questions as possible, and I've told you that we will go through the chat after and send out emails answering any questions I didn't get to.
Yep. Okay, great. So there were a lot of questions that were, as far as what's the income level that my child needs to file taxes. All I did is I went directly to the IRS publications. And so whether it's a 1040, and this is for children and other dependents, if your unearned income was over $1,050 and your earned income was over $6,300, then you must file a return. So if it's under those amounts, it's not necessary to file a return. And unearned income is like dividend income, that sort of thing. And I'm not going to give a lot of, detailed tax answers because I am not an accountant or a CPA. So whether they do the 1040A and it's the same, same information, or a 1040EZ. Now, my child earned some money but didn't file. Do I need to get a non-file form from the IRS? Like I said before, if they have earned less than those figures, then they don't have to file. You do have to disclose what they earned on the FAFSA. I have never, ever in the last 12 years had to get a non-file form from the IRS. Obviously, it's there because it is a non-file form, but I personally have never had to have a family that needed to supply one. So this is the filing requirement chart for the 1040 EZ. This one, I'm doing everything possible to lower my EFC. I've got all kinds of assets. Is thinking about cashing in the assets, putting them in a safety deposit box because they're no longer going to be assets, will they? Well, not quite. Is this legal to do? What do you think? No, no, no. You don't want to find yourself behind bars. So what happens if I lie, cheat, or fib on the FAFSA? It is serious. This is a federal form. Up to a $20,000 fine, 5 years in jail, or both. Plus, any financial aid that your child may have received would be returned, And in some schools, they have a code of honor, and your child can be expelled. So it is follow the rules. Disclose your income, disclose your assets. The EFC it is what it is. It's not worth having any of this happen. So the difference between student assets and parent assets, this comes up. So, and I want to show you a legal way of doing this. So the student, if they've got $100,000 in assets, they have no asset protection. It's zero. So it's assessed at 20%. That means that $20,000 is assessed on the FAFSA as far as the EFC. For the parent, say a two-parent household and the oldest parent is 45. They've got an asset protection allowance of $19,800. The assets are assessed at 5.64% for a parent. That's $4,500 that would be counted, assessed on for the FAFSA. And if you're a one-parent household, and this is so totally unfair, it doesn't make sense to me, but they have a lower asset protection allowance, and it just is what it is. Now, if your student has assets that are in their checking savings account that you can transfer into your account, and you do this prior to the FAFSA, you're still going to disclose that, but you can transfer that legally as long as it's done, ahead of time, and there will be less of an impact on on your EFC. So that is the only way that you can have the ability to bring that EFC down if you've got a lot of assets in a student's name. Now, sometimes you're not going to be able to do that if they have monies in a trust, and it's tied into legalities, and they don't have access to it until they're 28 years old. You still have to disclose that money, whether it's the student's trust or if you say you have a trust that was set up by a parent or a grandparent or some accident that happened and you got a settlement. Those monies have to be disclosed. So just do it legally. Just don't mess around with this. Now, there's all sorts of places that we've got monies, and it doesn't matter if you've got your stock options that have nothing to do with paying for college, or the mutual fund that you've got. It's not a retirement account, but it's your emergency fund. It doesn't matter that you are not going to use that for college. You must disclose whatever assets that you've got. There are going to be a few that are sheltered. The value of your retirement accounts, cash value inside permanent life insurance, small business assets, if you have less than 100 employees and it's a family-owned business, the equity in your home, and qualified annuities. Those are sheltered from disclosing on the FAFSA. So the rest of it, you've got to disclose it. So what I did is I just kind of copied and pasted all the questions that were sent in to Debbie, and I'm going to go ahead and put them all together along with the written answers. But for tonight, we're just going to go over it, and we have already discussed how to go ahead and submit more than 10 schools. There's a new thing right now that was disclosed just the other day, that is got to do with families that have been divorced, and there's only one parent that is going to be filing the FAFSA. And they really messed up. So instead of having parent 1 and parent 2, they now have husband and wife. Big glitch, big no-no. I can't believe that they went ahead and launched this on October 1st and didn't realize that. So what FAFSA, excuse me, what FAFSA is saying is that if you are a single mom, that you should go ahead and indicate that you are the husband. It's not going to have an impact on your EFC, but as far as I'm concerned, that's just going to open a whole can of worms. Now you're going to start getting Dear Mr. Luann Lee or Mr. Debbie Schwartz. And they need to correct this. I was thinking that the mom would put her information under parent 2 as a mom, which would then show would raise a red flag because, where's the information for parent 1? So as far as I'm concerned, I personally would not file this. It's up to you what you feel okay. And someone had asked, hey, I've got to have all of this done for October 15th for, I think it was Georgia Tech. You're just going to have to do what you feel is that you need to do. If you feel that your student is going to qualify for merit scholarships or merit money and it's got to be in that date, then just go ahead and be the man instead of being the mom. I think it's a horrible thing, but there's until they fix it, I just don't know what to do. Somebody's asking why I'm saying to the way that I'm deciding to do the DRT. I just feel better because I don't trust it. So you can decide what you want to do, but this is no different than when we had the FAFSA PIN and we were filing the FAFSA starting on January 1st. We would have to go in and file an estimated FAFSA just to get into the queue, and then everybody had to get their taxes done as quickly as possible and then go in and file the final FAFSA. So in my mind, that's what I've been doing for years, this is no different. But if it's confusing for you, then just use the DRT and hopefully it's going to transfer the correct information. How do we get money out of a 529 if a kid gets a scholarship? So you've just got to contact your 529 administrator. They'll want to see the information as far as the scholarship and whatnot, and you can it has nothing to do with the EFC, and that way you can have access to that money without penalty, but always go to the administrator and find out what their requirements are. We answered this earlier, if we cohabitate with somebody in the household, if you are not supplying financial support, then you do not add those children as additional members of your household. You don't add them as additional students in college, and you do not have to disclose your unmarried partner unless you're in a same-sex marriage that is not yet legal. That's a different situation. But if you're just living with your boyfriend or girlfriend and they're not financially supporting you or your kids, you do not have to add their information, their assets and their income on the FAFSA. But if you have remarried and you have a step parent, you do have to include their information. The market value of their home, we're not going to answer a lot of CSS questions, but this is an easy one. You can, once you get the recording of this, you can go ahead and click on this hyperlink, the finaid.org calculators, and it will take you to the federal housing calculator. And you'll read all about it, and you'll see that sometimes the schools also use tax assessments and Zillow, which is oftentimes inaccurate, and other real estate sites. So this is not the time to be house proud. You want to make sure that wherever you can find it, you get the lowest assessment or accurate. You want to be accurate, but you don't want to be over inflating, because you're not trying to sell your house. You're trying to, include it for the CSS profile on, because some schools will count it as an asset. Savings bond purchases by an ex-husband, and as well as 529s in the ex-husband's name. So if they are not on the FAFSA, obviously, then you do not include the value of the savings bonds. You don't include the value of the 529. If that money is you're going to need to use it for the first, second, and the half of the third junior year, it might behoove you to transfer that 529 from the ex to the parent who's filing. It's going to depend on a lot of things. You want to run the numbers as far as is this going to make sense, because you will have to include it as a parent asset. But if you don't, and you do have to use it in the freshman, sophomore, and beginning of the junior year, it's going to count as a student income in the following year that you're going to be filing the FAFSA. And once again, student income counts much higher at 50% over the student's income allowance instead of the 5.64% as the parent asset. And if you do have savings bonds as the filing parent, you just need to get the value, the current value of what those bonds are, and include them as a investment. So let's see here. I'm working with a parent who wants to know, okay, she's got a daughter and another son or daughter who may or may not decide to follow through and go to college. What do I do if I declare two children in college, or two students in college right now, and then when the time comes, there's only one? Well, that's when you go in and make a correction to the FAFSA and go in and say, now we only have one student instead of two. Don't do that until you know for sure that that's going to be the case. We have CDs and identified as parent name, child name under UTMA. That is considered a child's asset, the student asset. It is not the parent. The parent is just the custodian, and the student is the beneficiary. So if that's the case, then those, as long as the student's name is on there as the beneficiary, that is going to count as a student asset. And yes, the UTMA is considered an investment. A CD is considered cash and savings, mutual funds, stocks, and whatnot, and 529s are considered investments. And it's treated the same on the CSS. We already talked about listing colleges, in how to list them in order if your state is giving, has any grant monies. It doesn't matter as far as listing them in order of when the financial aid forms are due. That has nothing to do with it. Um, we've discussed the 10 schools or more. Any guidelines with twins applying for financial aid we may need to be aware of. I read a post just before we came online. One of the parents, they used the DRT for their twins. Everything was the same. Same assets, same income, everything was the same. One twin, their EFC is $13,000 more. I'm pretty sure that is because of the DRT. So in my mind, that's what you need to be aware of. You manually input the information and then go back and use the DRT so that you have documentation. It's not a problem if the financial aid forms arrive at a school before the application. They're going to connect through socials and whatnot, but if you find out that you had a bunch of schools on the FAFSA and your son or daughter decided, I'm not going to apply because I've missed, the boat, or I decided I don't want to, I would go ahead and remove those from the FAFSA and then send a correction in so that your information isn't just floating out there with all of your personal financial information. Okay, so this one is kind of about the Common App and the FAFSA. I'm divorced, had a household, have 17-year-old twins. One lives with the other dad, visits every other weekend. My son wants to put both parents because he's with his parent number 2 every other weekend. You want to sit your son down and tell him no, but heck no. You want to make sure that if he lives with you more than 50% of the time, then that you are the parent. All the information on the FAFSA, on the Common Application, on the CSS profile, you want all of this to be lined up. You don't want any red flags, and that would definitely be a big red flag. One son is going to be applying to Canadian colleges. Should he complete the FAFSA just in case? Yes. And I'm not 100% sure, but I remembered being on a webinar a couple of years ago, and somebody said that that you still might be able to qualify for the federal loans at a Canadian college. I don't know that for a fact. It is something that I will look into and include when we send out the rest of the information. I haven't had any any students yet to go to Canada, so I will look into that and confirm. Once again, confused about why I say to use the DRT. I'd like to use the DRT. I want to see the numbers. Just do the way that I said it. File manually, wait for 3 days. Once your FAFSA is processed, then go ahead and do the DRT. I've heard that if I don't use the DRT that I'll need to send my tax forms. Is it true? It could be. I've used the DRT in the past, and I've had to send in tax transcripts for some of my clients. Most of the time, if you're going to be qualifying for Pell Grants, they want to see your tax transcript and verification of other information. It doesn't, just because the DRT, you don't send the DRT or don't use the DRT, doesn't mean that that's the only reason why they ask for verification or ask for tax transcripts. And most of the time on your CSS profile, you're going to be using the iDoc system, which is then uploading tax returns and sometimes tax transcripts. I heard that it's going to slow down processing and increase my chances of being chosen for verification. If you've done everything legal, you don't have to worry about verification. Just have all your documentation. The only time verification is going to be a problem is if you know that you lied, fibbed, or misled. And that's when you need to be concerned. A lot of questions about 529 transfers. So I called 3 different state administrators last week and found out a couple of things that I didn't know. So at the first webinar, someone had asked, can my ex-husband transfer the 529 to me? And I thought no, because it has to be within the family. But I found out from Pennsylvania, from Virginia, and Florida that you can transfer ownership of the 529 to anyone, whether they're in the family or not. The beneficiary needs to stay in the family. So if the beneficiary is your son, as an example, and you've transferred the ownership to your best friend, and your son now doesn't need to use that 529. Your best friend could then transfer the beneficiary to your son's cousin or sister, sibling, or such. It has to be within the beneficiary's family. Why would you want to transfer the 529 from the ex to the ex? If you guys are getting along and everybody's on the same page, hey, we want to just do this the most efficient manner possible, you need to run the figures, run through the calculations. If the 529 with the parent that is not filing, if you need to use that money prior to the junior year of college, it is going to count as a student asset, income when you file the FAFSA the next year. And that income depends. You want to run the numbers between whether this is, because if you just run the calculations that I used in the previous example of because there's the asset and the income protection and whatnot, and I'm confusing myself right now, when the 529 is, say, changed from the parent that doesn't file to the parent that files. Now you get the current value of that 529, and that's going to count as a parent asset. If they don't transfer it because they don't get along and don't want to give up control and whatnot, but yet the student is still going to need that money, it's going to count as student income the following year. And then anything over the income protection allowance for the student, which right now is $66,200, then it's going to count as 50 cents on the dollar, or 50%. Prepaid tuition plan, same thing. You can request a change of ownership. There's a few more steps with notarizing and whatnot. Just remember that once you give it up, you've given up that control. You are no longer in the equation. So if you don't have a good relationship and you're afraid that your ex might do something else with it, then just take the hit on the FAFSA, or on the EFC, I'm sorry. Number of questions about small businesses. So I'm a real estate agent. Am I considered a small business? You were registered as an LLC. As long as the account is separate, your business account is separate from your family account, and you don't use that account for any family business, then yes, you are a business and you do not have to disclose that asset. The husband who owns 50% of a dental practice, and with unrelated partners, and they each own 25%. He's going to, if you click on this hyperlink up here, FinAid.org, FAFSA Small Business, it's going to explain how you go about doing that. But briefly, you're going to have to get the net worth, whether it's a business or a farm that is not a family farm. You have to get the net worth, and that is going to be reported as an asset. In the question of the dentist, it's just going to be your percentage of the net worth of the dental practice, which is going to be your 50%, not the 50% of your other partners. And it's going to get a lot more detailed than that. You're going to have to get your CPA involved when you're having to disclose your business assets on the CSS profile. And that is just a whole, I mean, that's just like doing business taxes. The FAFSA is kind of like doing personal taxes, and the CSS profile is doing like business taxes. It's very painful. So, but on the FAFSA, as long as you don't have any non-family partners and you own it 100% and your accounts are totally separate, your business accounts totally separate from your family accounts, it doesn't matter if you're a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC. And for the mom who is in the process of starting a business, once again, if that is just a business account that you are strictly using for your business, it doesn't matter that you hadn't worked yet on in 2016. If that account is your business checking account, you do not have to disclose that as an asset on the FAFSA. Just make sure that you never use it for, family finances. There was a big, long thread the other day about submitting FAFSAs for more than one student. So the FAFSA belongs to each student. Each student is going to have their own EFC. And it might be a little bit different. It just depends on the student's income and assets. Maybe one is a little bit more, likes to work and the other one doesn't. So the only time that there's going to be a little bit of a difference in the EFC is because of the student's income and assets. As far as the parents' information, it's maybe not quite 50-50, but if, say last year you had one student that you filed the FAFSA for, and your EFC was $30,000. And this year you have two students, and each of them has an EFC of $15,000. That is their EFC. And that's what you're going to, because they're going to be applying to different schools and such, so everybody has an individual EFC. It's not if your EFC is $30,000 for each student, and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to cut that in half and it's only going to be $15,000. That is incorrect. So whatever comes up on the EFC, that is for them. And typically it's about 50%. Triplets, once again, it's about a third. And I have clients that have twins as well as triplets. So just imagine that, having three going to school at one time. So is it possible to earn enough merit aid to reduce what I'd pay for my EFC? It is. It depends on the school. They can, some of them are, need blind or financial aid blind, and they're, going to offer your student X amount of dollars, and typically it's cost of attendance minus EFC equals the need. But if they give them more merit, more than what your EFC is, then you don't have to come out of pocket with the full EFC. It doesn't happen too often. Your EFC is pretty much the number that you are going to be expected to pay out of pocket before receiving any financial need-based aid. And if a school sees what your EFC is, a lot of times they're going to give you some merit, but you're still going to have to come out of pocket with your EFC, and then even sometimes more of a gap if they don't meet 100% of need, and not too many do. So we already have the Canadian college question. Do I just work with families to submit the FAFSA, and how much do I charge for it? I almost didn't put that on there, but no, I just don't work with families just to do the FAFSA. It's not worth my time. So yes, I do charge for the services that I provide, but it's more than just filing the FAFSA. So. So here's once again, a mom was, she was a bit confused about her daughter lives in New York. She's applying to school in Connecticut. So once again, it depends on New York. If she's applying to any schools in New York, that's her resident state, then if they give a grant for, putting schools in New York State schools first and second on the FAFSA, fine. But in the case of, Connecticut does have that, that they will give grant aid if you list within the first two positions, but only for Connecticut residents. It's not for someone who's out of state who is applying to a Connecticut school. So that was the end of the questions that we had received. Some of them, we had a bunch of duplicates, and I didn't put all of the duplicates on there. We would all love to have our kids graduate debt-free. Well, we're finding out that in many cases, that's just not going to happen. What we want to make sure is that they're not going to end up graduating with 5 or, God forbid, 6-figure student loan debt, which I have seen, and they're coming back with this great big debt load, and they're ready to move back in with you. Almost 50% of students that's happening to. So, because of sites like Paying for College 101, we're here to share information and help so that this kind of thing, it doesn't happen as often as I see it, and I see it quite often. And last, I just want you to know, you have not failed as a parent. If you have to tell your kid that you can't send them to a college that you can't afford, I'm not going to tell you that you should never take on any loans, that you should. That's your personal decision. I think, the way that college is today, we have to take on some debt. It's an investment into our children's future. But we don't have to take on more than is going to be what I consider obscene. The average amount of federal student loans, they can graduate with 27 to 31,000. I think that's not bad. They can pay that off in 10 years. And if it's going to get them into the start of a career that's going to, give them the ability to support themselves as adults and start a family and such. But, when you're talking about $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 worth of debt for careers that you'll never make more than $35,000 a year, there's other options. And, unfortunately, we as parents, we didn't create, we feed the monster that creates this mess, and we have to stop feeding it so that we can start, so that, that $1.4 trillion worth of education debt, it doesn't, I don't want to see it go up any further. And I've been around in this business where it was less than $1 trillion, and now it's 1.4 trillion, and it's just getting larger and larger. So that pretty much got to the end, Debbie. So I don't know. What time is it? It's 10 o'clock. Do we want to call it? We've been on for an hour and a half. Are we ready to say call it quits, or do you want me to go through the chat and answer some of those questions? Debbie, I can't hear you. I see your mouth moving. Excuse me. So I'm not hearing you at all, Debbie. People are signing off. So why don't we do this? We'll go ahead and finish up, and we'll follow up to the questions that are in the chat box, and then send that out to everybody. Does that sound good? All right. Well, everyone, good luck. I wish you the best. I hope you got value of this. And like I said, we'll go ahead and go through the chat and get answers to maybe something that we didn't address tonight. All righty. Take care, everyone. And I still have a voice.